Spinning. Oh, we're live. Good afternoon and welcome to your Wednesday Acsom Bulletin. My name's Kevin Graham and today I'm joined by Patrick. Paul John is away setting up tonight's recording of This Is Acsom. So unfortunately for you lovely people, you're left with me going to fumble my way like Anthony Ralston playing a right wing back role in our Scotland team for the next hour or so. Patrick, how are you today?
Not bad, Kevin. Not bad. How's yourself?
Doing away. We were just talking there about it's good to have a football tournament on in this sort of quiet time for club football. And it is a quiet time for club football when you actually look at it all over. There's no transfers happening. There's nothing. Everything's just seemed to have been put on hold for the Euros and the Copa America and stuff like that. That doesn't mean to say that deals are not being done, but they're just not getting. They're just not getting spoke about or absolutely revealed yet, and it's a kind of quiet time. So it's good to have some football to watch. Again, we're going to speak about the Euros later on, and specifically Celtic players playing for Scotland, hopefully tonight. But the Euros has been quite interesting so far. Good games. You wouldn't have thought the Turkey-Georgia game would have been as absolutely classic as what it actually was. That was superb. That was a superb game of football. Two teams just gone to it. And it's interesting, a European tournament tactical wise. It used to be that the international football would like dictate what tactics go into club football, but I think that's completely changed now. And international football takes its lead now for club football. I mean, you look at the long punt now for the kickoff. Scotland have been doing that for 30 years. Teams just knock the ball back and hump the ball up the park. It's good. I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying the Euros.
It's been good. As you say, the games have been so entertaining. Obviously, the first game was quite disappointing. I mean, I'll not claim to be a big Scotland fan, but I support Scotland and I like to see them do well. So I watched the game and first 20 minutes you've already 2-0 down, you're out of it. It's a bit pride at that point, and it ends up being a disappointing result. We end up scoring without even having a shot on target, which is quite impressive.
I was in a bar in Spain watching it, so by the time you got to 2-0, you were kind of like, oh no, and you were thinking to yourself, right, 2-0, get to half time at 2-0, then you start putting you start putting things. It's like watching Celtic in Europe, get to 20 minutes at nothing each, then after 20 minutes you get to 25 and you go, right, at least get into half time at nothing each, or even better, the worst to get into half time is nothing each, and you start counting the things down. Then you get to 2-0 and you go, right, get to half time at worst 2-0. Then by the time you get to half time at 3-0, the game becomes a kind of irrelevance in the second half, and you're too busy talking about other things in that, and it's again, you want to be competitive. It's the same as us in Europe. You want to be competitive. And for what I've seen of the Euros so far, Scotland have been the least competitive team in it, in the games that I've actually watched. That's
by far. I mean, I think that Germany team have been, I don't want to say underrated. It sounds stupid calling Germany underrated, especially when they're hosting it, but I think they have been underrated somewhat. They've sort of flew under the radar. Obviously, England always get hyped up before these by the British media. France are always there and thereabouts the last 10 years. Spain look a decent side. Italy won it last time out. So I feel as if Germany have gone under the radar up until that game. I really fancied Germany to go on and win it, actually. And they obviously played really, really well. Hard to tell whether that was us being poor or them being really good, but thought Germany played really well. And it is a lot like Celtic in Europe, actually, the way that you feel after the game. And Celtic in Europe, it's hard to compete with these teams, even over just 90 minutes. It's hard to compete with these teams, Real Madrid, Bayern Munich. But just to maintain a level of pride, to just compete in the game and look as if you're in the same level, and maybe a 1 or 2-0 defeat is, respectable. But in these next two games for Scotland anyway, I think you probably need 4 points to progress now with the goal difference the way it is. But just to go back to what you're saying about, clubs used to take international football, and that's where they'd sort of take their lead from. I don't know how you feel, but I feel as if there's been a sort of separation this time round, because I seen a stat yesterday or today: 30% of goals have been scored from outside the box. And under Pep, the Premier League, the tiki-taka that European football has become the last 15 years, you don't see that. You wouldn't see an Ange team doing that. You wouldn't see Arteta's Arsenal doing that. You've seen, obviously, a lot of the games have been high scoring. You've seen late goals, so it's been a really good tournament. But I think we've seen, maybe it's a fluke so far. Maybe, I'm talking rubbish, but so far there's been a lot of goals outside the box, and I don't think you've seen that in football too much the last 20 years.
No,
So
you didn't.
it's been quite exciting in comparison to the way football's been going.
It has been, because it is basically a knockout, because 4 points gets you through. So there's teams that are having a real go to start off with, and you'll maybe get it. You'll maybe get it differently in the second round of games, but then it's basically like a cup competition, ain't it? And I think, man, you've also got the managers haven't really got much time with the players. So they're setting them up in a certain way, which is easy to get across in a quick bit of time. Unless you're Scotland, who looked quite clueless and they didn't actually ken what they were there. I mean, I think Scotland have looked tactically clueless and technically clueless in that game on Friday night. When you've seen other teams, you look at Georgia. I mean, we drew with Georgia and bet Georgia. You look at them yesterday, and they made an absolute decent fist of it against a team that was better than them. You look at the Albanians against Italy. You look at even Serbia against England. They were all in the game. They were all in the game
last night as well. Could have won it at the end, and it ends up being Portugal. Yeah.
It's completely madness. I think Roberto Martinez is a complete and utterly madness coach. I mean, I think he ended up with about 6 attackers on that pitch last night. But it's interesting to see how Martinez went from being one of the poster boys of European football to nobody will touch him. The next thing he gets the Portuguese job. From a fan's point of view, you look at him, you go, he's had that Belgian golden generation. He was linked with Celtic. Sean Maloney was linked to be one of the next best things. And you go, what happened to the Belgian golden generation has completely disappeared. But Martinez wanders into a Portuguese side, which are one of the favourites to win it. And you go, how does that actually happen? It just puzzles an outsider looking in. It really puzzles me.
I've never rated Martinez personally. I don't think he's a good manager at all. He obviously had that Belgian side. They done okay up until a point. They obviously, I think they lost to, I think it was France they ended up losing to the semis of the 2018 World Cup.
They battered France then. They were unlucky to go out to France that year. Definitely.
Aye. And then Euro 2020, I actually can't remember how they got on, but it was a wasted generation. It's a bit like, I mean, Croatia obviously have a lot of good players, but a smaller country, and they managed to get to a final. They got to a Nations League final, on penalties. I think they took that to penalties that game. Martinez, I think he failed at Everton personally. I know last 10 years they've had their struggles ever since Moyes left, but didn't think he'd done that well. I'm sure he had a club recently. I could be wrong. I'm sure he was at club level recently, and I don't think he done too well either. I could be making that up, but I've never really rated him as a manager. I think it baffles me how he gets jobs. It's a bit like that. Is it Gattuso? He's never had a decent spell at any team, and he keeps getting managerial jobs. It's just one of these.
He's got another job,
Gattuso, I think he went to Saudi, did he not? I made that up. He did get a job recently.
He got sacked from Marseille, and he has got another job in Europe somewhere. It's definitely definitely in Europe somewhere. Right, that's enough of the Euros talk. We will talk more about Scotland and the Euros later on. Let's have a wee look at the comments that are coming in. Celts Ryan, really no point putting a start time anymore, getting ridiculous Acsom. The bulletin always starts at 12:30, mate. It always starts at 12:30. And the reason that the stream appeared early was because Paul was setting up because he's got stuff to do. That's the reason, but it's always going to be 12:30, so don't get excited that you're going to miss anything. Paul McLean, Turkey Georgia was the best international match in donkeys. It was really, really good. Joe Hamilton comes in and says, hail, hail for a very hot Austria. Paul comes in and says, for Santa Ponza. Nice, nice. Andy Lee, Germany, best side I've seen so far, and it's not just because we are rubbish. And Stephen Kennedy, we'll go back to this is a nice segue into the wee rumours section. I would not be upset if his side Martin Dubrovka played a good game the other day with Slovakia. He did that, and it was one thing when I was watching him, I was going, this is maybe no good for us if he's having a good tournament, because all of a sudden there could be other suitors out there for him. For me, Patrick, we're getting linked with goalies. If you've wore a pair of goalie gloves in the last 2 years, Celtic seem to be getting linked with you. And there was a wee rumour the other day that we have signed the Turkish goalkeeper for Man United, and that was rumoured a couple of weeks ago. And it did come for the Celtic underground site, and they came out and says, well, by the way, we think this is a done deal. And that wouldn't really surprise me, because the guy fits the profile of guys that we look at. The price seems on the side that we would look to spend. I mean, we did spend 5 million on Barkas, so we have spent that kind of money on a goalkeeper before. And that is kept quiet. Doesn't surprise me either, because you've got the player, most of the club, and the manager on holiday. And it could probably be announced when Brendan Rodgers comes back up to work. That's why when I saw that tweet, I was like, that's probably got some legs in
it. Yeah, I would think so. There seems to be this sort of, you might call it a holiday period. I'm not sure when our pre-season starts again. I imagine it's in a week or two.
2
The sort
weeks.
of youth players and the non-Euro players will come back, because the cup final was the 25th of May, so that's almost a month now. Obviously, what you're saying earlier as well about these players being at the Euros, any player who's even in a squad at the Euros won't want to be thinking, oh, I had you split, there you go. I think it was Milan and Napoli he get jobs in, which is baffling to me. But all these players that are at the Euros, they've probably said to their agents, look, these are the wages I'd be wanting. Talk to clubs, but don't come to me with anything until I'm finished with my national team. So I think the round of 16 starts on the 29th, Saturday the 29th of June. So even if Scotland get that far, we'll be coming home 1st, 2nd of July, you'd imagine. So there'll be a lot of players who are probably in our price bracket that we're looking at who'll be home by start of July. So maybe middle of July we'll see these players start to come in, because although the Euros goes on to the 14th of July, I don't think we'll be seeing any German or Spanish or French players coming to Celtic from those squads. It'd be good if Big Phil Crook fancied a season in the SPFL, or Tony Kroos decided to put the boots back on for another year, but I can't see it. But no, I think you're right. I think we'll be talking to agents, we'll be talking to clubs, we'll be doing our research. I'd like to think we're doing all that, to be honest. I think we've known since February that we need a centre half and a goalie as a matter of priority. So I'd like to think we're identifying those players and we're talking to those clubs and agents now. And, as you say, beginning of July, middle of July, we should start seeing players come in. If we get to that stage and players still haven't been signed, I'd probably start to worry, if I'm being honest, because the vast majority of players we're looking at should be home by then and should be looking at, if they're wanting a move, getting a move. So I'd agree with you there. Probably another month until we get the first couple of bodies in the door.
Aye, it is, but you're hoping that we've done the groundwork, and a lot of these things are just in the background now because guys are on downtime. And you've also got this thing with the market being quiet, with the market being really quiet. Players are not moving at this precise moment in time, and clubs will be scouting things out, and other clubs will be going, well, we might have a look at that further down the line when they come back into pre-season training, and I'll have another look at them and stuff like that. So there's a lot of moving parts to this, especially at this point. What you usually find is it's quite easy to sign players at this point that clubs want rid of, or you're paying over the top for, or they're out of contract. these guys are really, really quite easy to deal with. Stephen Kennedy need two goalkeepers. You've got to agree with that, because Stigrast was on some podcast, I can't remember what podcast it was, where he basically says in his best Taylor Swift that him and Celtic are never getting back together, and he's gone somewhere else. It never worked out for the big fella, did it, really, with us? And so you would think that we are going to bring in two. You would think that we are going to bring in two goalkeepers. If the Turkish guy from Man United is your number one, what do you go for as your number two? Do you go for a experienced guy like Dubrovnik, or do you actually go for I'm going to say a Scott Bain type as your third choice goalkeeper, a guy who's done well in maybe your domestic league and would be quite happy to come and sit at Celtic for to be the third choice choice goalkeeper? What do you think? What do you think we'd be looking for there?
I don't think we should be signing two goalkeepers. I think we probably do need three, but I don't think we should be signing a second one. I think we should be pushing the boat out, getting the best possible goalkeeper that we can, for within our transfer range, 10 million or less. But we've got Scott Bain there. He's part of that sort of 8-man Scottish homegrown quota that we need for Europe. You've then got, obviously Siegrist is going to leave, as you say, but if we are going to be building a £15 million facility at Barrowfield to improve the youth and women's footballing facilities, we need to start looking at promoting the youth players. And I can't actually remember the guy's name. I think he was only 18 or 19 when he played in this game, but I think it was a Glasgow Youth Cup final about a year or two ago, and it went to penalties. And this Celtic youth goalie had a fantastic game, and I've not heard anything about him since. We've had, I think Connor Hazard's away now. I think he's left permanently. We've got other goalkeepers in and around the place. I think you need to be getting them in the squad, because we're talking about signing a third choice goalkeeper behind Bain, but I think Siegrist still never played two competitive games for Celtic. Bain has come in when other goalies have been unavailable or been rested, so Bain would appear to be the backup anyway. So if you're wanting a third goalie who's basically never going to play, but you might need them in an emergency, I think you've got to look at the youth for that, because I had a wee bit of a go at Johnny Hayes, not his fault, about a week or two ago when he was involved in the youth setup when he was signed up, because I can't see the logic to spending 10 to 15 million, which I think is the rumoured amount that it's going to cost to develop Barrowfield, to then appoint guys like Johnny Hayes, no harm to him, has only just finished his playing career. He's got all the relevant badges. He may well turn out to be a fantastic coach. But if we are wanting to invest in the youth, surely we should be looking at the best possible coaches, because we're trying to build the best possible facilities for these coaches. So there seems to be a contrasting vision when it comes to staff and facilities, in my opinion. But when it comes to the goalkeeper, I don't think we should be, paying money for a third choice goalkeeper. I think we should be promoting from within, because, if the situation arises where, we've got two injured goalies, or, Brendan just fancies rotating the squad a bit for like a League Cup game, I would come in with a youth player there.
JJ, I agrees with you exactly. It's the same with the third striker as it is with a third choice goalie. They should both be youth players. We don't moan that we didn't bring through the youth players, and so people asking for the two goalies to be signed. It depends on how the coaches rate what's already there. It depends on. I'm not even going to try to attempt to say Big Toby's second name, because I will absolutely butcher it. But it depends how he's done on his loan spell. And I don't think he's had much game time on his loan spell either. So obviously that will be getting fed back to the club. The Turkish guy, as I kept on calling him, is Altay Bayındır. There you go. Actually, I eventually remembered his name via Google. But you probably agree with the Johnny Hayes things, right? Let's have a look at the Johnny Hayes things. What I would say about the Johnny Hayes appointment is, we're not asking them to go in there and absolutely disarm an atomic bomb. We're asking him to go in there and give his experience to under 18s and are playing in the Lowland League. It's the same way. It's the same way. Absolutely, it's the same way. McManus, because Stephen McManus is there as well. But I do get I do get the optics here. I do get how it looks. It looks like jobs for the boys. These boys coming in. Have we actually looked at if there's a Georgian coach it could come in there and give the guys, because you look at the Scotland players at the Euros, right? You look at the players that Scotland have developed. There's a lot of them playing for very big football clubs, but at the football clubs, they're the workhorses in the football clubs and are probably not the most technical gifted in the teams. John McGinn's a captain of Aston Villa, but when you watch Aston Villa, what you see about McGinn is his work rate, his guile, his aggression. Andy Robertson, absolutely fantastic for Liverpool as a wing back, but what you actually see that is his work rate, aggression, and his guile. You didn't look at them and go, bloody hell, they're technically gifted. They're a technically gifted football player. The only one I can maybe say is a wee bit technically gifted in the team when they actually play it, Billy Gilmore. Billy Gilmore doesn't look out of place in that Brighton side whatsoever with technical ability. But you look at our big players, our big players, when they're playing in the bigger leagues, and you can't talk Callum McGregor because you can slag Callum McGregor all you want. Outsiders, Graham Souness and Rangers fans and folk like that. But he's completely bossed the Scottish League for 8 or 9 years now, being a technically decent player. What I'm kind of looking at is that you look at the other players who are playing in a top 5 league or the English Premier League, McTominay, guys like that. They're the workhorses in their teams. They're not the technically gifted players. And this is where I get when you're talking about guys like Johnny Hayes coming in, Stephen McManus coming in. We've failed to produce technically gifted Scottish players for decades now. And it's maybe something that we need to actually start looking. Why are we not getting youth players coming through? Like we do know, we do know that there's a massive gap between 16 and 20. They didn't get a game for Celtic. They didn't get in the first team for Celtic, and their progression is actually weighed down. I mean, my Hangme would say, see, steady sending these boys to the Lowland League. I'll become like the Harlan Globetrotters and go start playing these European sides. See, like how you've got the Champions League set up where you actually go and play their youth sides. I would do what Brentford done a couple of years ago, and it would cost us a bit more money, but it would be worth it in the end run. Saying, right, we're going to play Salzburg, we're going to play Ajax, we're going to play, and this is how you're going to learn how to play football. Then when they get to a certain point, if they're playing that calibre player, then they must go play like man's football. That's when they go on loan to certain places. And again, I would not send them on loan in Scotland. I think it's a waste of time sending them in the Scottish League because of the standard of the Scottish League. That's just that. Yeah. I ken Ryan Christie benefited. I ken Christoph Ayer benefited from it, but I'm like that. No, not in the Scottish League. They've got to go somewhere else where there's a technically better league than what they're going to play in Scotland, because they've got to learn to play football if we want to produce guys that are going to play at the highest level.
I think it depends on the type of player as well. I mean, if you've got a Ralston type, and you can identify from young that Ralston, he's a grafter, he's a physical, solid lad, he's a good defender, can put in a decent cross, decent in the air as well. I wouldn't so much have a problem with him going out on loan in Scotland, because it sort of suits his game to develop that particular side of his game. If you've got a guy like maybe Karamoko Dembele, a tricky winger, a creative midfield player, I would obviously send them, or maybe a different type of fullback, send them out on loan. But, if you say you had a sort of target man type player, I don't think there'd be any harm in, if he was 18, 19, big physical guy up top, sent him on loan to, say, Livingston or Hearts or something like that to develop, because that's the type of player you want him to become, if you know what I mean. But these more technically gifted players, I totally agree. We should be sending them to, don't know, maybe the English Championship or some sort of European league, maybe Belgium or something, or a Scandinavian league. But I think it depends on the type of player. I would say.
That's a great point. It's a conundrum that we're in because you do need players that know the club and know the league, but once they go to that higher level, it's very, very obvious, very, very quickly that these guys are not good enough to play at that level. But you do need these guys to dust themselves down and go and dig out a result at Livingston, even though they're known, or Ross County, for example. So it's a balancing act that Rodgers has got to get right. And he mentions that he likes a Scottish core in the team. But you do get to a point where you're sitting there going like that. You can't rely on that Scottish core for where we want to go because they're not going to be technically good enough. A guy like, it was no surprise to us being a Celtic fan. I love Big Tony Ralston, I love the Bricky, but it was no surprise to see him getting completely overawed the other night because he's not at that level. It's the same way Jack Hendry, even though he ended up in Belgium and then ended up in Saudi Arabia. You're looking at these guys, Portia, so you're like, these guys were decent in the Scottish League, but that step up is no there. And you do need that core. Ralston was superb when he came in at the end of the last season, but to see the abuse that he's been getting, you're going, well, he's basically possibly the fifth choice full right back that Scotland have got because of the number of guys that are actually in front of him. And he's not a first pick for us. And yous are expecting him to go to the Euros and being absolutely fantastic, absolutely be up against one of the best teams in the world and get there. But as a Celtic fan, I got that. I love having Anthony Ralston at the club because I know in a game against St Johnstone at home, if we need Anthony Ralston, he's going to be fine against St Johnstone at home. But I didn't want to see Anthony Ralston against Barcelona in the Champions League. And that's the rock and the hard place we're in. And it's extremely difficult for us to have our ambitions, but also need these type of players because of the league that we play in. And this is how I want to leave Scottish football. Like, that's exactly how I want to leave Scottish football, because as long as we have that conundrum, we will not get to the potential that we actually are. And that's just where I'm at with that.
And I would totally agree with you. I think in games, I think there's a game earlier this season, Motherwell, I want to say back in maybe November, or, you come up against these teams, Livingston, St Johnstone, and, Alistair Johnson never had his best season, let's be honest. I mean, he's a good player. He played really well in some games, but I think he was a lot poorer than what he was last season. And in these games where, a lot of times this season we struggled to break teams down, and teams like Motherwell and St Johnstone and Livingston, they're wasting time, 30 seconds into the game, taking about a minute to take a goal kick. Rough, they're playing a totally different sport at times. Absolute thugs, some of their players as well. The fouls that they commit, and sometimes you need a guy like I'm sitting there maybe 60 minutes in, going, I want to see Ralston on here just to give us a bit of physicality, a bit of fight, a bit of drive, play them at their own game, and because I think that's what we need in games sometimes. And I sort of look at the way that we play football now domestically, in order to win and to entertain. We're playing it a certain type of way. We're sort of ball on the deck, play the better football, be the better team, pass it to death almost, and eventually over 90 minutes the quality will shine through. But you then take that into Europe, and you've seen it under Rodgers' first spell, and I think you're possibly seeing a ceiling with it under Ange as well in Europe, where if we're trying to get the ball on the deck and be the better football team, we're not going to be that in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
We gave Leipzig 2 tough games. Played well against Real Madrid for a half. Get 2 draws against Shakhtar. Bit disappointing. Probably should have beat them in both games, but I'm going back 2 years now. But if you're trying to be that better football side, that's not going to work in the Champions League. And you sort of look back to Martin O'Neill and Gordon Strachan, and Strachan's team wasn't as good as O'Neill's, but it had the same physicality, it had the same strength, tall players, the drive, the fight. And I think that's probably how we competed. Now, obviously, the game's changed in 20 years. I don't think having 11 Scott McKennas would win as the Champions League. But to compete at that level, I think you actually almost need to play an entirely different type of football. You need to totally rip up the system almost. I think John said it in previous podcasts as well. So it is a bit of an island we found ourselves in, and I think it was probably the worry that we all thought about, 5, 10 years ago, where we're going to get to a stage where, you might qualify for the Champions League and bring in all the money and dominate domestic football. But once you actually get into the Champions League, you're still miles behind. I don't think we should be miles behind, actually, because you see the teams that we've lost to, you can list them off: Cluj, Ferencváros, Copenhagen, Bodo Glimt. We've got bigger budgets than all these guys, and we should be beating these guys handsomely. And that's a failure of, management, recruitment, board level. But
there's
in terms of these sort of not middle of the range, but teams who, a bit like Leipzig, Shakhtar, guys who are there every year, like us, but we just can't compete because of the size and the way that our league's set up. I say size, it's not size because similar sized countries are able to compete, and it's a failure of Scottish football. And it's a failure, not just guys like Neil Doncaster or Peter Lawwell or something, it's failure from, teams like Hibs who are going through managerial merry-go-rounds and just can't seem to get their act together and just, embarrassing themselves, to be honest. Hibs should be a top 5, top 6 side every year comfortably, and yet they're languishing in 9th and 10th. Aberdeen as well this season, actually. No coherent vision, running the club like it's some sort of bowling club. So I think, it sounds selfish, but in order for Celtic and other teams to compete more in Europe, which is where football's heading, it's heading to this European style league. I think the whole of Scottish football needs to get its act together, because we're not set up to succeed.
I'm a big advocate now of the European League. I think it's a natural end game for. I think a lot of domestic football is absolutely done. Leagues are done. There's teams dominating leagues. It's a product now. It's an entertainment, and the Scottish game is not good. There is an argument, and I love having this argument when folks say, "Oh, there was a challenge this year." Aye, there was a challenge this year, but if we give Rodgers the key to the vault, there's not going to be a challenge next year. There's an argument that Scottish football for the last 20 years has been a one-horse race, because you look at the number of titles that we've actually we've won. The fact is, we can go through a season and only lost 3 games, and we'll come out and go like that. We were bang average this season. And and that's not an arrogance thing. No, it is no, we weren't
the good. It's a crazy statement to come out with, isn't it? It's mental that you can only lose 3 games and say that was quite poor.
That is quite poor. That aye, and you're going that shouldn't be. And for me, a European league's on the way to go. You mentioned Martin O'Neill, and this takes us to the tagline: why Rodgers must be given the key to Celtic's cash flow. Martin O'Neill was on the BBC website the other day, and he was talking about how at 72 he believes ageism is playing a part in him not being in a management role. I think the way that he left Nottingham Forest has maybe got something to do with that, but Nottingham Forest was it's still a basket case of the club, as the amount of the amount of charges that are against him. So he's talking about that. He believes folks see him as a dinosaur because he says in European football, with very few exceptions, it's coaches now. You're the head coach rather than the manager. So the days of Sir Alex Ferguson running the club, or myself running at Celtic, I think those days for a younger coach have gone. I remember Desmond, who is the major shareholder of Celtic, said he wanted me to take ownership of the football club, and we didn't even know each other. So you look at the lack of structure that we've got in the back. And there's a few guys in the comments going like that. No, it's no Rodgers. He can't get the key. He will only be able to open the vault as a board. Do you think Dermot Desmond's maybe says, are we going to see Dermot Desmond going to Brendan Rodgers? I want you to do it your way because I've sacked Mark Wall and I've sacked the head of recruitment. So this summer is on you. You're getting complete charge of the football club if we do gone. Because I ken what Neil's saying, but Rodgers is not a young manager. Rodgers is an experienced head. So do you think Dermot Desmond, when you have a look at it, sack the head of recruitment, sack the head scout. So are we seeing Rodgers getting complete control of the football club, which may see him be getting the key to Celtic's cash vault?
I think it is. I sort of had this feeling when Ange was in for 2 years because he was always talking about. I think he spoke after he left about how he got the job, and he was talking about how he had a call. I think it was Dermot at first, and it was about half an hour call, and he goes, "Right, that was grand. I'll get you on the phone with the CEO, and we'll get this sorted." And he comes off the call and he turns to his wife after being knocked back from European club after European club and going, "I don't know whether I picked up the wrong signals there, but I think I've got the job." And just after a half-hour chat with Desmond. So it shows you the influence Desmond has, where he just has a chat with someone, he goes, "All right, there's the job." And he's given full control. And I think Ange said that pretty quickly after coming into Celtic. He goes, "I love rebuilding a club. I love being given total control." So it sounds if, the way that Desmond operates, the way the club operates, we like to give managers complete control and say, "Right, there you go, that's yours." And you come. So I'd like to think, the Mark Lawwell experiment didn't work, and Rodgers might be given full control. It's a bit of a worry transfer-wise because transfer-wise, he didn't actually do that well first time round. I know he had his mate, Lee Congerton in, so maybe that was the the wee sort of asterisk
Congerton,
against his name first time round.
Who's never been out of work since he's left us. He's never been out of work since he's left us. So, who done it wrong? Us or him? Who knows?
I know. So, yeah, so that's the question. But you've got Rodgers there. I mean, he must know. He obviously spoke in that press conference about the opportunity arose from a phone call with an agent. And I really don't like to think that's how we do our business, but it did work this time. And if he knows a few youth players that he's worked with in England and are good players, and he wants to bring them in as a contact, then fair enough, that's going to work. But I'd like to think that we're giving them 5 to 10 different profiles even in every position, and they're doing their analysis and they're maybe seeing how their stats line up, and they're making a move on these types of players as well, and we're doing our research. But I mean, as you say, he's youngish. I think he's only 51, Rodgers, or 54 or something. I want to say early 50s anyway, and he's not a young coach in the sense that he's been in management a long time. I think he started in 2007, so he's got a lot of experience under his belt. But he's obviously still got long to go. He could manage for another 20 years if he wanted. So he's got that experience. This season would have been a totally new experience for him. He's never really cracked the sort of European scene. He got to that conference semi-final with Leicester a few years ago, but apart from that, he's this season was probably one of his better seasons in Europe actually as a European coach. So that'll be a challenge that he'll want to face as well.
I think.
But no, you're right. I think we do like to give managers full say, full control, sort of offload all responsibility that the board should have, and just put that on the manager, and let him sort it out. And it's worked for Arsenal under Wenger, worked for United under Ferguson, worked for us under O'Neill. It has worked in the past, but it's when it doesn't work and you cycle through managers and you have to spend a lot of money. That's the worry, sort of long term. Luckily, that hasn't happened for us, but hopefully Rodgers, with his experience, can guide us forward.
There seems to be we do things half-hearted, and under last season, I'm only going to judge the January transfer window as a Rodgers window, because I think some of the players were coming up anyway, were already in the pipeline. They were scouted to fit a model, and Rodgers, I mean, I said it last week, I reckon that Lagerbielke has been made a scapegoat. He's been the one to put out for Rodgers to go, this is no working, look at him. And I think that's very harsh on the player, but that's just the way that I actually see that. You look at the window, and he was offered Adam Eder to be talking to an agent. Rodgers will be fielding phone calls for agents every day when he's in Santa Ponsa up the Dubliner. Like he will be fielding calls, because that's how it works. Your scouting team will be fielding calls for agents. Have a look at this guy, have a look at that guy. their scouts will be feeding in players into the system as well, going, look. But there will be opportunities arrive because Rodgers will have his favourite agents, the same as Ange Postecoglou has his favourite agents of guys that they actually want. You look at the January transfer window. There was a rumour he was interested in Scott McKenna, who's back on the market, who ended up going to Copenhagen and doing quite well in Copenhagen, right? He was interested in McKenna when McKenna was at Aberdeen, right? So any link that you get with McKenna, again, you go, there could be something in that. I think McKenna's wages could be a bit of a stumbling block because he is a free agent, and there's probably a couple of bottom-end English Premier League teams will come in for him. The other defender that we've been linked with, and I'm going to butcher his name here, is Flavius Danalucci, who is he plays with an Italian club, but he was on loan at Salzburg towards the end of last season. What's interesting with that for me, and again looking back at the January window, this is the two ways that we may work. You've got either agent. By the way, he's available. You can get him up. And Rodgers knew him. Rodgers knew the player. And he went, oh, I remember that guy. That could work for us, right? Scott McKenna, a player that Rodgers already knew. He didn't end up coming to us, but we did have a concrete interest in him. And then you had Nicholas Kuhn, who seemed to fit a scouted model. And this is where this defender guy fits the same model for me as Kuhn. Real Madrid youth, Bayern Munich youth, has had quite a decent career flying about European football. You look at Kuhn, Bayern Munich youth, ended up in Austria. And we seem, if this has got any credence at all about this defender, then it seems that we're looking at guys who have been at top club academies, are now 22, 23, have done all right, but no reached their potential. And these are the players that we're actually scouting. This is how I think when I look at the Kuhn transfer and look at this Flavius guy for Salzburg, I'm like, that could be a goer because we take Kuhn as the benchmark now. This is the sort of market that we could be looking at.
Yeah, and I think, it's not at the same level, maybe in terms of academy, it's at the same level the Benfica academy. We've obviously had a look at Jota, that's worked out. We're now having a look at Bernardo, and you look at the guys who have left that academy. João Felix obviously went for, was it mega money, something like 120 million or something to Atletico Madrid. He's not a superstar in any sense like maybe Haaland or Mbappe, but that club has made hundreds of millions from that academy. So it's recognised as a good academy and they've got good youth players. We've obviously had a relationship with Man City in the past. You could name half a dozen players, Denayer, Guidetti, Cham. I've now ran out of names. I think Scott Sinclair was at Man City at a period as well. But we've had a working relationship with
Beaton and Victor Wanyama. Near Beaton was also on trial at Man City.
All right, there you go.
So that's where that came from.
There you go. But I mean, as you highlight, we've obviously got a relationship with City. We've got a relationship to an extent with Benfica, as you say about the Bayern Munich link with Kuhn. I don't think it's not a bad policy to look at the best clubs and the best academies in the world and take guys who haven't made their first team. Not outright failures, because I'm sure there'll be outright failures at these academies who don't even play professional football anymore. But guys who maybe take a step down in league size, like Austria, as you say, or Beaton, who ends up in I think it was Israel. We signed him from, or Guidetti, who'd been out on loan to a few clubs and Denayer and stuff. So it's not a bad policy as long as we're doing our research and they look like good players. And Guidetti, we didn't end up signing him, but for a few months he did look like the solution. 10 years ago, Denayer I thought was a great player. He's had a good career at Lyon. Cham, obviously, great player on his day. Didn't think he was consistent enough, personally. He had a great first season, but after that, just couldn't find the consistency. But it's not a bad way of doing things. I'm still unconvinced by Kuhn, if I'm being honest. I mean, he was terrible when he first came in, but he was recovering from weight loss, and I think it was some sort of surgery in his mouth.
Aye.
Uh,
Got
you
his
know,
wisdom teeth out seemingly.
aye, and he lost a
His
lot of weight.
wisdom. Aye.
So he came into the side and he done reasonably well towards the end of the season. Bernardo, I think, great ball carrier, physical, tall. I think he's went missing in a few games, but he is only 22, so definitely room for improvement there. And Rodgers is the type of guy that he can improve. He can improve a player. So I agree with yourself. It seems to be a strategy, one of many strategies. The other strategy being phoning up Dudu Dahan on the last day of the window. And I certainly prefer the failed Man City projects to the Dudu Dahan option. So it's as if there's a few different strategies in place, but this one has certainly served as well. You know, Paddy Roberts in the comments there. Frimpong, another one. So yeah,
Then,
it's a strategy I'd like to develop upon.
we've worked it well. We've actually worked that strategy well. And I think the last transfer window, apart from Bernardo, we done too many punts, too many risks, too many guys from certain leagues who now Palmer could turn out to be a decent player and he didn't come from like a big league or anything like that. But there was too many punts. There was too many guys who I've never questioned Bernardo's mentality, and I've said that I reckon that's because he's in that Benfica academy. So you've got somebody like Kuhn who's been in the Bayern Munich academy, the guy that we're getting linked with who's been in the Bayern Munich academy and also the Real Madrid academy, right? There's a mentality there of these guys who have been there, who have dropped down, but then have had a decent career after it at a lower level because they went to play football. You look at Frimpong. He basically left that Man City academy at 17 because he went, I want to go and play first team football. And he came to us. And wherever he's going to end up in the summer, we're going to benefit from that. Robert Arbuckle goes right back and he says, we started that 2 decades ago with Crosas for Barcelona. I think it's sort of been forgotten for the Postecoglou time. It was still there in the first Rodgers time as well. You have Boyata as well, Denier as well, but I think it's kind of been forgotten. But I think you can actually see us going back to that. And it takes us back to the aforementioned Lee Congerton, who actually says that when he was at Celtic, they wanted 2 guys for PSG that were in the PSG youth setup. And we ended up getting heavy for the PSG youth setup as well. These guys will probably cost a bit more money than your Yangs and the players like that we brought in. Why I think Rodgers will not be given the key to Celtic's cash flow is I don't think he'll need it, because the club will do what they always do, is whatever they bring in, they will spend. So, for example, seemingly Celtic won, let's have a wee look at this, 35 million pounds for Matt O'Reilly. Now, Matt O'Reilly to Atletico Madrid will not actually happen until Atletico Madrid sell a couple of guys, do a couple of things on their side, right? That won't happen, but it's rumoured that Atletico Madrid would be willing to go to £25 million for Matt O'Reilly. Matt O'Reilly moving for that kind of money to that kind of league is not going to happen in the next 2 weeks. That is going to happen later on the Monday. Matt O'Reilly will be back at Celtic for pre-season training, because these clubs didn't start operating till August. Whether you're talking about big money deals like that, eh? We already looked like it was mentioned yesterday. You've got Haksabanovic, you've got guys that we're going to lay out, and I probably agree with Paul. Paul says he reckons it will spend between 30 and 40 million. I reckon your net spend will be 0. But it depends on the type of players that we bring in. But spending that net spend of 0, which is between 30 and 40 million, we will still dominate Scottish football spending that kind of money. We will dominate Scottish football spending that kind of money. But what we've got to actually look at, can we spend another £30 million on top of that?
Oh, we definitely
and the answer
can.
is probably, for me, the answer is no, because we what we spoke to earlier on, the Scottish League. It would be extremely difficult to spend £60 million in a window a net spend of £30 million, which I think the last time we probably done that was with Martin O'Neill. That was probably the last time we had a tilt at Europe as well, right enough, when you actually have a look at it, and Stratton as well. But for everything that we described earlier on this podcast, we'll spend what we'll bring in. But what we spend that on is what it hinges on. I didn't get hung up on fees. I get hung up on the calibre of player that you actually bring in, because fees can be completely distorted.
Yeah.
Liam Devine's talking about Kelleher, right? For me, Kelleher's going to go for 20, 25 million. He's not coming to Celtic. But the reason that he's going for between 15, 20, 25 million pounds is the league that he is actually in. This is how guys like the centre half that have been linked with Nicholas Kuhn come into our market price because of where they are. So for me, fees didn't actually mean nothing. It's a calibre of player that you bring in, but no having a zero net spend is not a bad thing if it's £36 million that we've spent on that team. That is a massive, massive rebuild. And I don't think we can get hung up at the net spend at the end of the window. I think it'll be zero. We're not going to spend £60 million, but we will spend massively in the summer.
I think it's always been close to zero, even when Ange came in and it was viewed as a massive rebuild, because we got, I think it was 17.5 for Eddie and 13 for Ayer. I think we got 2.5 for Christie. So after that disaster, we still managed to bring in 32 million from 3 players. And obviously go out and sign, I think it was 4.5 for Kyogo, 2 and a bit for Jovanovic, I think it was 3 or 4 for Starfelt. Jota and Carter Vickers were loan deals. Abada, I think, was 3 or 4 million. And then, Joe Hart was only £1 million, I think. So that was a big rebuild. And I think we probably managed to turn a profit, actually, when I'm reading all those fees out. And it's, from the board's point of view, it's a fantastic strategy. They are quite happy, because if we maintain that and we get the manager right, you can have a net spend of zero. You can keep your wages to under 60% of turnover. You can qualify for the Champions League every year. You can have record financial results every year. And, we've still got the dangling carrot of competing in Europe to keep the fans happy and sell out the season books. So it's fantastic.
It's a great business model. What we're moaning about.
And as long as we don't want to ever progress in Europe, and as long as we're happy with beating Rangers every year, I'm probably coming across as very entitled and spoiled, and
No, you're not.
even though we're, but it's to be at the exact same stage every single season is depressing. We're talking about European football and getting hammered. I seen an analysis a few months ago. I think it was actually back in November. When we get hammered by Atletico. This is actually a new phenomenon, this hammering. Who was the mob that hammered us in the 90s? Genatel, is it? Or the first season under Strachan. I can't pronounce their name. Their name escapes me. But we get a doing 5-0 away.
Bratislava. Armenia, Bratislava.
Aye, I'm sure there was a team in the 90s that done us as well for 4 or 5-0. It'll come back to me after we finish the podcast, no doubt. But since 2013, we get hammered 7-1 in the new camp. It's been pretty consistent. Nostel's Zamax. Strange love the doctor. Aye, that was the team. So up until 2013, those were the only 2 hammerings. But just about every year since, we've been hammered in the Champions League. Every single year. So it's not something that I've said a few times. I don't think this is something that's sustainable, certainly in the current economic climate. To ask fans for £200 for 4 home games to then get hammered twice and to struggle to beat a team for a decade that's not sustainable. They might think it's sustainable, but I don't think it is.
No, it isn't sustainable. It isn't sustainable. The tourist factor eventually wears off with guys who are willing to take season ticket holders tickets who maybe can't afford the £200 or just go, I'm not spending an extra £200 to go and watch us getting absolutely plummeled on a Tuesday and Wednesday night because we didn't actually want to compete. I mean, my aim for Europe next season is finishing 24th out of 32. That's it.
Same here. Same
If
here.
we finish 24th out of 32, then you go, that's superb. Then you go,
Aye.
well, we can maybe win a knockout game. We can maybe get there, maybe
You
eventually
get
win a
that.
knockout game.
You get that
Aye,
extra tie, don't you? The 10 games. Yeah.
aye. So you're like, that's our aim. And spending, I'm going to go, spending between 30 and 40 million pound should actually get you that 24th place. It should actually get you that 24th place compared to the other teams that are also competing for that 24th spot. And this is
So,
where we have failed. Sorry, what were you
I
going to say?
some of those. You look at some of those pot four teams. I mean, what is it? I say pot four. I don't think they do pot four anymore. But with the expansion to 36 teams, obviously Aston Villa are there because of their low coefficient. But I think you're projected to have, a few more Turkish teams, an Israeli team. These are winnable games. Certainly at home, possibly.
Definitely at home.
Yeah, certainly, those pot four teams with the new teams coming in, I think you should be looking to win at least one game at home, possibly pick up a few draws away from home. And I think there's an analysis that said 8 or 9 points gets you 24th. I think if you get 8 points, you get a pretty good chance. You get 9 points, you're pretty much guaranteed that 24th spot. So 8 or 9 points. I mean, it's not a lot to ask when I mean, your easiest game will be Maccabi Tel Aviv or something, and you've obviously still got the Shakhtars and
Aye.
Feyenoord and all these sorts of teams. So
You, you,
it's a bit of an ask. It would be a bit of an achievement, but it's not totally without reach. So I agree with you there, Kevin.
I didn't think it's out of reach with that spend. I do not think it's out of reach with that spend because I agree with Paul. This can't be changed in one window. Like, we've got the players that we bring in this window and the players that we bring in January, which is only Nicholas Kuhn, is going to be that player. I do reckon Adam Eder will be a Celtic player by the time we kick off in August. I'm actually quite confident about that for some reason, no matter what noises Norwich are actually making. You've got this window, you've got 3 windows to peak following year. This is because Kuhn's bedded in, he's going to have a pre-season. The guys that come in this window will bed in, the boys that come in January will bed in. And you're looking at the guys to be mainstays of your team by the time we get to autumn next year. And then you go, like, we're having a decent crack at Europe now because we've been together for a year. We've been like, we've moulded into a side at that point. And this is where we failed last season. Like, because you're having a look at that, you're going, well, we didn't ken who's going to be, we can't see who's going to actually step up from the crop of players that we signed last season that can be first team players this season. It's no obvious which guys are going to be, and that's the mistake. That is the absolute mistake that we made. So I'm confident Kuhn will come good because he's had that 6 month, he's had a troubled 6 month as well, and now he's going to have a pre-season. And that's where I'm coming from. I reckon he comes with a good stock, good background stock. I think Palmer's got a chance because his stats were really, really good, but he needs to knuckle down and work. But I think Palmer has really got a chance. But every one of the guys that we sign this summer, whether it's 4 players, 5 players, 6 players, you're really looking for them to bed in really, really quickly, but become mainstays of the team, reach their peak as Celtic players about September, October next year. That's what you're looking for, because it shouldn't be, as I say plenty of times, it shouldn't be easy playing for Celtic. It should take you a wee while to bed in and get used to the actual demands of winning every week.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. It's especially with Kuhn, you've obviously got mitigating circumstances the first month or two. He's sort of kicked on a wee bit. As you say, he'll have that pre-season with Rodgers. He's a good man manager, he's good at developing players. And I think that helps with that model that we spoke about earlier, playing for Benfica, Man City, PSG, Bayern Munich. Even if it sounds daft, they might not be the best footballers, but they train to a certain standard. They're surrounded by guys of a certain standard. They know what's required at a big club. They've got that. You'd like to think they've got that elite mentality, that sort of top tier performance. That's what's required.
And
they've probably grown up dreaming of playing in front of these big stadiums. 80,000 at Bayern, 60,000 at Man City. To come to Celtic, yes, you're not in the same league, the same stadium capacity. You're playing the Champions League. You need to win every week. You've got the pressure. You need to be top of your fitness. So I would agree with you there. That scouting model.
It gives them the taste to going back to playing for an elite club. It gives them that taste that they thought there was maybe gone, and you go, by the way, bang, you're playing for an elite football club here. If the background stuff, right, and you need to win every week because you're now playing for an elite club. And guess what? If you do well here, that move happens again. And that's a big thing for these boys, and that's something that we can't hide from. We're offering them that chance to get back to the level they thought they were going to be at 18, 19. And that's why I think these type of guys are decent signings. Patrick, we've been on an hour already. That's us done. Never really spoke about the Euros and that. What's your prediction for the night? What's your prediction for the game tonight?
I'm swithering. We need a draw, so I'm going to predict a draw. I think when you're good at parking the bus and you're parking the bus against a lesser team than Germany, you're always in with a chance with Steve Clarke. It's not that I don't want to win the game and we shouldn't go for it, but a draw suits us. And to play for a draw probably isn't the worst thing. So I'm going to say a nothing each.
I would bite your hand off for a draw at this precise moment in time, because I think a good laugh would be going against Hungary as a heat to try and get out. I think that's a glorious failure set up for it, as Scotland usually do. I've noticed over the last couple of days that there's guys being set up as scapegoats. Trent Alexander for England's already been set up as a scapegoat for them if they didn't win it. And Callum McGregor's kind of been set up for a scapegoat for Scotland if they didn't get out the group or this and that. So I'm going to go for one each tonight, and Callum McGregor's going to score Scotland's goal. That's what I'm going for.
I'll take that.
That's what I'm going for.
The supposed Celtic captain, Callum McGregor.
Yes. I'm not going on about Graham Souness, even though, as you know that the band that I'm in, we've got a song that basically calls Graham Souness a horse's thing. And when I posted it on Twitter the other day, our Spotify streams went up 356% on the day that I posted the link to our song calling Graham Souness a horse's behind. So if you want to check that out, just go search the Celtic Cross Collective on Spotify. Right, we need to go. Thanks very much, everybody. That was great, Patrick. I'll see you all later.
Cheers.